Today's ranking video is for English progressive rock band Porcupine Tree. Today we're going to be ranking all 10 of their studio albums. Let's get ready to prog rock. Welcome back to Rocker's Beer Review. Today we're going to be reviewing, ranking even, the albums of the British progressive rock band Porcupine Tree. So, Porcupine Tree, what they're all about. Well, they were formed by Stephen Wilson in 1987, and it was pretty much a sort of individual sort of solo project by him, certainly with the first few years, and with added contributors. And then it wasn't until sort of 93 that he wanted to work more in a sort of democratic band sort of setup, and this is when he sort of worked with some of his frequent collaborators. So you've got Richard Barberry, who used to be in Japan, the keyboard player. You've got Colin Edwin on bass and Chris Maitland as drummer. And this was the sort of first permanent lineup. Then Wilson was obviously the lead vocalist and the guitarist. This remained until February 2002 when Chris Maitland left the band and was replaced by Gavin Harrison. And that's really their sort of lineup. So their career has spanned, over 20 years. They started off more in a more sort of psychedelic sort of sound, reminiscent of sort of early Pink Floyd. Then as they sort of signed and went a bit more mainstream, they became more of an alternative rock band. Then in the sort of early 2000s, when they signed to a major label, they were much more towards a sort of progressive metal sound. And after the tour of their sort of 10th album, The Incident, in 2009, it was their biggest album. They decided to sort of literally make the band inactive. Stephen Wilson at this point was making solo albums. He wanted to contribute, spend more time doing his solo albums, and the other members of the band were doing other projects as well. So pretty much the band dissolved itself at that point. And although there's been plenty of calls for a reunion and new music, I think Stephen Wilson certainly is quite happy doing his solo stuff. And there's probably very little chance of the band getting back together again. So today we're going to do the ranking of all 10 albums from 10th till 1st. And I'd be interested to know if there's any fans of Porcupine Tree out there. For me, they had a big impact when I first heard them. It really got me back into progressive rock. In that sort of period, I got into them back in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s. And certainly some of their music was quite unique for me. I'd never really heard anything quite like it. Yes, some of the stuff is, almost as commercial and almost like could be in the charts as sort of a lot of alternative rock bands at that sort of time. But they never, I don't think, really got the sort of radio play that they deserved. But you can't underestimate the impact that they had in terms of the whole progressive rock scene. There's a lot of bands that came out and certainly became more popular due to the sort of movement of Porcupine Tree. So let's start at the beginning. In 10th place is actually their first album, On the Sunday of Life. This came out in 92. It's pretty much a Stephen Wilson science project, really. I think at the time he just wanted to make music that he liked with no sort of real sort of direction. It's a little bit of experimental in many ways. There's lots of different sounds and styles, and it's sort of very different to a lot of the sort of more well-known stuff that the band have done. And I think, there's lack of direction and lack of real quality songs on it. So I'm putting On the Sunday of Life in 10th place. In 9th place, Up the Downstairs. This came out 93. This was the next album. It's almost like an instrumental soundtrack, like of space rock. Again, lots of long sort of instrumental and atmospheric sort of music. And again, no real songs to sort of that really sort of jump out to me. So Up the Downstairs is in 9th position. In 8th position is The Sky Moves Sideways. again, I'm starting to feel that these albums, in terms of their ordering, are coming in the way they were released. So this is actually their third album. I'm putting it in 8th position. Again, if you like early Pink Floyd, space rock, lots of atmosphere, you know, then I think you'll really enjoy this. I mean, it's almost like a 1970s science fiction soundtrack. Stars Die is probably the only real song as such, but it's a great song. But I'm putting Up the Sky Moves Sideways in 8th position. In 7th position, surprise, surprise, we got is Signify. This again was their next album, came out in '96. Again, still a lot of those sort of psychedelic rock sort of elements and heavy instrumental parts, and nothing really sort of. You can see it's starting to move a little bit away from that into some more sort of song structures, and this is where it really became more of a band, and I think this is where their sounds really started to develop. But I'm putting Signify in 7th position. In 6th position, we're going well out of order now. This is their last album, The Incident, came out in 2009. It's a solid, if unremarkable, album for me. It doesn't, a lot of their albums sort of develop their sound with each one, adding new elements or going into new sort of genres of music. But The Incident really sort of carried on from the last sort of album before that. And for me, it's, you know, it doesn't do anything new, it doesn't offer anything new. It's still a good album though. I mean, songs like Time Flies, it's 11 minutes, but it's a real prog rock classic. It's really catchy, and you wouldn't believe that, you know, the song was that sort of length. It's really accessible. So it's a good album, The Incident, but again, you know, they've done better albums. In 5th position, I'm putting Stupid Dream. This came out in 1999. This, again, moves away from their sort of longer instrumental and space rock to some more sort of pop rock, alternative rock sort of sound. And especially we've got songs like Even Less, Piano Lessons and Pure Narcotic are really great, almost little pop rock songs. But for me, the highlight of this album is probably the very sort of Pink Floydian 8-minute Don't Hate Me. It's an absolute classic song, really good song. So I'm putting Stupid Dream in 5th position. In 4th position, I'm putting Lightbulb Sun. Now, this came out in 2000, and it's really a continuation of Stupid Dream, in that it bridges the gap between sort of the long instrumental space rock, Pink Floyd-esque sort of songs like Rush on Ice, Last Chance to Evacuate, but with the more accessible songs similar to Stupid Dream, songs like the title track, for example, and She's Moved On. Again, they're starting to write really good songs now, songs that will probably be, you know, that perform much better live and a lot more accessible, certainly to new people. So I'm putting Lightbulb Sun in 4th position. I don't know why, but there's something about this album that just reminds me a little bit of Radiohead's The Bends. I mean, this and Stupid Dream. If you like Radiohead, that in their sort of the earlier sort of phase, even Pablo Honey and The Bends, maybe not so much, you know, OK Computer and the stuff that came after that, Kid A, etc., etc. But certainly The Bends, the more sort of commercial, does remind me of this sort of era of Porcupine Tree, and especially Lightbulb Sun. So Lightbulb Sun came out in 2000 in 4th place. So, top 3. Now, this was quite difficult, the top 3, because I love all 3 of these albums. But I'm putting Fear of the Black Planet, which came out in 2007, as the 3rd position. This was the album that I saw them live play. That I only seen them once live, and this was the album I saw them live. It's only 6 songs on this album, but it's a progressive rock mastery, really. Need for Size is a 17-minute track that really highlights what they're all about, from their sort of really heavy stuff to really soft, atmospheric sort of sound. But the highlight for me on this album is the very accessible Way Out of Here. I think it's a really, really good track. But it's a good album, 6 songs on it. There's no real fillers on it. Just I would have wanted a little bit more. And in 2nd place, where on another day I could have probably put this first, but I still think the first album is definitely, for me, the best. But in second place is Dead Wing. Now, this came out in 2005, much heavier. This is when they're in their real sort of progressive metal sort of sound. There's a much more crunchier guitar sound, a lot less atmospherics, you know, in terms of the songs, a little bit more straight ahead. Songs like Dead Wing, Halo, Shallow, they're top tracks, but the best tracks for me are the sort of more slower, sort of more progressive songs, like Start of Something Beautiful, or Arriving Somewhere Not Here. I mean, they are absolute stunning songs, and some of the best that they've ever done, the band's ever done. So I'm putting Dead Wing in second position. In third position, and to be honest, the thumbnail for this video may have been a clue when I was recreating the album cover of In Absentia, which came out in 2002. This, for me, is the album that actually, where I first got into the band. This was the first that I'd heard of them, and I got this album, and I was blown away just by the fact that I'd never really heard. I knew that it was rock and I knew it was progressive, but I'd never really heard it as so, you know, with that accessibility but still heaviness. So you've got much more a heavier sound, certainly from their sort of early Pink Floyd-esque sort of sounds. Open a Blackest Eyes is a really good example of this, and it's a really good song. But even the sort of more acoustic song like Trains, which I think is probably their best song. I think it's a brilliant, brilliant song. Then you've got the very haunting Heart Attack in a Lay-By and Strip the Soul, equally brilliant songs. It's a really varied album though. There's lots of light and dark on this album. But for me, this is why I've rated it number one. I think it is the best of the sort of heavier sort of sound, along with their sort of almost pop rock, alternative rock sort of sound as well. A really good album. If you've never heard of Porcupine Tree and you want to check them out for the first time, then that would be the album I would suggest again. In Absentia came out in 2002. It's a stunning, stunning album. This was the first album with Gavin Harrison on drums as well, who's a brilliant drummer in my opinion. So that's my Porcupine Tree ranking. I mean, what do you think? Do you think that they should, you know, are you a big fan of Porcupine Tree like I am? Do you wish that Steven Wilson had continued with the band? Do you like any of the Steven Wilson stuff? I mean, certainly some of his his albums can be quite a little bit Marmite. You either love them or hate them, and the problem is that he just wants to keep developing the sound each time. So even the newest album by Steven Wilson is a much more electronic, and there's less guitar in there, and then you've got some real sort of progressive 70s, heavy progressive 70s albums that he's done as well. He's really, you know, he's in the forefront of progressive music, whether you're into you know, the much more sort of straightforward progressive metal like Dream Theater, or you like some of the more obscure sort of art rock stuff. Maybe you're a big fan of Talk Talk. This is, you know, I am a big fan of Talk Talk. They're obviously an 80s sort of almost pop band, but they were very, very progressive, certainly in their later sort of albums. And I think Steven Wilson's really captured that. He's really sort of captured a sound that I don't think can be replicated. People have tried, but they haven't really got there. So what's your favourite Porcupine Tree album, and what do you think of my rankings? Do you agree with them? Do you think In Absentia is their best album? Let me know in the comments. Hope you've enjoyed this video. I know the last ranking video I did was Metallica, a little bit more sort of mainstream. This one, I'm hoping there's a lot of Porcupine Tree fans out there that will comment on this and let me know what their experience of the band was, and what they think of Steven Wilson and some of his solo albums. But until the next one, you know what you've got to do. You've got to keep on rocking.